What do you do when the people who raised you decide your front door is optional? That's the question I kept asking myself at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, phone glowing in the dark, staring at a text that didn't feel real. Not a question, not a request. A notice, the way a landlord posts a notice on your door before an eviction, except this was my house, and my own brother was the one serving it. Hey, Kyle here. Moving in Friday. Mom's cool with it. Clear out the guest room, Lowell. I read it 4 times, waiting for a punchline that never showed up. There was no would it be okay, no any chance we could. Just a date and an assumption. Like my house was a hotel he'd already booked and I was the staff who hadn't gotten the memo yet. I sat up against the headboard and scrolled back through our message history, because something about the tone told me this wasn't out of nowhere. 3 months earlier, he'd needed my truck for a weekend and returned it with a dented bumper he swore was already there and a gas gauge sitting on empty. 6 months before that, a panicked ask for money to fix his car followed 2 days later by an Instagram story of him at a casino, drink in hand, laughing at something off camera. My brother had a gift, an actual talent, for treating my life like a resource he was entitled to dip into whenever his own ran dry. I called him. It rang out twice. Straight to voicemail, I called again. Voicemail again. Third try, he finally picked up, music thumping somewhere behind him, a girl's laugh cutting through the bass. Yo, what's up, Kyle? What text? The one about moving in Friday? This Friday? Oh, yeah. Sick, right? Me and Brittany just need a spot for a few months. Mom said your guest room's basically sitting empty anyway. I never talked to Mom about this. Well, she said you did. Or she said she'd talk to you. I don't know, man. Point is, we need a place and you've got the space. It's family. You're not going to say no to family. There it was. The phrase our whole family kept holstered for exactly this kind of moment. The one word that had been doing all their negotiating for decades. It's what got Dad a cosigner when his credit tanked. What got my sister free weekend babysitting because she deserved a break. What got Kyle out of an insurance claim he lied his way through after he wrecked his first car. In my family, family only ever pointed in one direction, and that direction was toward me, holding something out. Funny thing is, when I needed a fresh start at 23, nobody offered me a guest room. I slept in my Civic for 2 months and worked doubles until I could afford a studio with roaches crawling out of the baseboards. Nobody called that family duty. Nobody showed up with a casserole. You can't just move in, Kyle. Why not? You live alone, you've got the space, and Mom already said, Mom doesn't live here. She doesn't get to make that call. Silence, then the wounded tone kicked in, right on schedule. Bro, are you seriously being like this? After everything? After everything, what does that mean? You know what it means. We're family. You help family. I told him I'd call him back and hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. Within 60 seconds, my phone lit up like a switchboard. Mom calling me difficult and selfish, Kyle texting, whatever man, thanks for nothing, Dad instructing me to call my mother immediately and fix whatever I'd apparently broken by having boundaries. I turned the phone off and sat in the dark kitchen making coffee at midnight like a lunatic, thinking about the house. Not inherited, not gifted. Bought, 3 years of 60-hour weeks managing commercial construction jobs, a down payment scraped together on instant ramen and 0 nights out, a mortgage I'd never once missed. The guest room Kyle wanted so badly was an empty space to me. It was my home office, second monitor and all, the room where I worked remotely twice a week. To Kyle, it was just square footage sitting idle. To Mom, it was space I wasn't using. To all of them, apparently, my entire life was raw material they were free to redistribute whenever it suited them. By 2 in the morning, I had a plan. Not a plan to convince anyone. A plan to make no actually carry weight, because in my family, no wasn't an answer. It was the opening line of a negotiation. Boundaries were puzzles to be solved. Locked doors were suggestions. The next morning, I called a security company and ordered the full package. Cameras at every entry point, motion sensors, a video doorbell, glass break sensors on the ground floor windows, the whole arsenal. The rep on the phone asked if I was heading out of town. Something like that, I said. Then I called Derek, a buddy from my construction days who'd since moved into property management and knew tenant law inside and out. Hypothetical, I told him. Someone tries to move into your house without asking. What's the legal move? He laughed. That's called trespassing. You call the cops. Even if it's family? Blood relation isn't a deed. They got a key? No. Then it's attempted breaking and entering if they force it. Want me to draft a cease and desist just in case? Maybe. Let's see how Friday plays out first. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than exhausted. Not anger, not resentment, control. I wasn't scrambling to react to someone else's chaos anymore. I was 3 steps ahead of it. The tech showed up Wednesday afternoon. A guy in his 40s who looked like he'd installed systems for people with far worse family problems than mine. 4 cameras, motion sensors on every door and window, a keypad, by the front entrance with a code only I knew, an app that put my entire property in the palm of my hand, day or night. The doorbell camera was the crown jewel. Night vision, 2-way audio, the works. I could see and talk to anyone standing on my porch from anywhere on the planet. "You expecting trouble?" he asked, packing up his tools. "Call it preventative maintenance." He grinned like he respected the answer more than he needed to understand it. I spent that evening testing everything obsessively, arming and disarming the system like a kid with a new toy, watching alerts stack up on my phone every time I opened a door. Then, feeling a little petty, I opened the settings on the doorbell app and recorded a custom greeting for anyone who rang the bell. "You've reached a private residence. If you don't have an appointment, please leave. Smile. You're on camera." Short, polite, unmistakable. Thursday morning brought a 3-minute voicemail from Mom that opened with, "I'm very disappointed in you," and closed with, "Family is supposed to stick together." No mention anywhere in the middle of the fact that nobody had asked me a single thing before deciding my house was available. I deleted it without finishing. Kyle texted next, asking if I was really going to make them homeless, as if he and Brittany weren't currently living in a perfectly functional apartment, as if his failure to plan ahead was somehow my emergency to solve. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Derek and told him to draft the letter. Official letterhead, both their full names, all of it. Friday morning, I was up before 6, printing 2 copies of a cease and desist that read like poetry to me by the time I finished. Reviewing it. Unauthorized entry and trespassing, video surveillance in place, all violations to be reported to law enforcement immediately. I sealed them in envelopes and set them by the door, armed the system, grabbed my laptop bag, and headed out, except I didn't drive to the office. I parked at a coffee shop 3 blocks from my house, ordered a cold brew, and settled in with my phone propped against the sugar packets because, according to Kyle's original text, today was the day, and I wanted a front row seat. At 10:47, the alert came through. Motion at the front door. I opened the app, and there they were. Kyle with a duffel bag over one shoulder, Brittany beside him with 2 suitcases, a U-Haul idling in my driveway like they'd already measured the guest room for furniture. Kyle rang the bell. My recorded greeting played through the speaker. He squinted up at the camera and waved like we were old friends catching up. "Yo, it's me. Open up." I tapped the 2-way audio. "Kyle, you're not welcome here. Leave." "Dude, what the hell?" We drove 3 hours. "I told you no, you ignored me." "Now you're trespassing." Brittany stepped up beside him. "This is ridiculous. Your mom said, your mom doesn't own this house." "I do." 10 seconds before I call the police. His face went from confused to furious in under a breath. He grabbed the handle, found it locked, rattled it harder, started pounding on the door while jabbing something furious into his phone. Somewhere in there, a text from Mom lit up my screen. "What is wrong with you? Let them in." I counted down out loud through the speaker, sipping my cold brew like I was watching a show I'd written myself, and at 0 I hit the alarm. The alarm blared. My phone lit up. Police dispatched. I paid my tab and drove back, arriving in time to watch 2 officers already talking to Kyle on the sidewalk, the U-Haul blocking half the street, a neighbor watching from her window like this was the best entertainment she'd had all week. I introduced myself as the homeowner and offered the doorbell footage without being asked twice. Time-stamped, unambiguous, Kyle's own hand on the door handle he had no right to touch. "That's trespassing," the older officer said flatly, no hesitation. After Kyle tried the "he's my brother" defense one more time, he asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at the U-Haul, at Brittany's suitcases, and thought about how many holidays this would poison if I said yes. "Not today," I told him. "But if they come back, I will." They left without a shred of apology, anger radiating off them like heat off asphalt. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a retired teacher who makes dumplings good enough to end an argument, came out and asked if everything was okay. "Family drama," I said. "The worst kind," she said, and disappeared back inside, though she'd be back within the hour with proof that kindness doesn't always announce itself loudly. An hour later, my mother showed up in her church clothes, holding a casserole dish like this was a welcome home party instead of the scene of a police call. I let her stand on the porch and talk to a camera. "Let me in. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. You told him he could move in without asking me. I'm your mother, and this is my house. Leave, or I'm arming the alarm." She stared at the lens like I'd started speaking a language she didn't recognize. "What happened to you? You used to be such a good boy." Translation: obedient, compliant, easy to guilt into anything. "I grew up," I told her and watched her drive off after, setting the casserole down hard enough to rattle the lid. I left it on the porch for an hour before throwing it out, unopened. Saturday brought the extended family circus, aunts, cousins, a grandmother, all weighing in on a group chat I wasn't even part of, all having already decided my guilt without asking me a single question. Praying for you both. That's low. Calling the cops on family. Your mother won't stop crying. I archived every message without a reply. They'd made up their minds without hearing a word from me. They always did. Noon, Kyle came back, and this time he'd brought reinforcements. Mom, Dad, an aunt, and a woman with a clipboard who introduced herself over the intercom as a family counselor they'd hired to facilitate a productive conversation. Nobody had asked if I wanted mediation. I told them exactly that, then counted down out loud one more time. Before the timer hit 0, the counselor was already speed-walking to her car. By the time police sirens echoed down the block, the rest of them had scattered into 3 separate vehicles, leaving my driveway empty and silent. That evening, an unknown number texted an actual apology. Brittany, saying Kyle had told her. I'd said yes, that she hadn't known that they'd found another place. It was the only apology I got out of the whole ordeal, and I took it. That night, I filed for a restraining order. The 2 weeks before the hearing were the quietest stretch of my adult life, right up until they weren't. My power cut out one evening. Someone had broken the lock on my breaker box and flipped every switch by hand. A few days later, Kyle showed up at 5:47 in the morning, live streaming himself standing on my porch holding a sign that read, "Brother locked me out, please help," violating the restraining order in real time for an audience of strangers. I called it in without hesitating, and he sprinted to his car the moment he realized the comments weren't going the way he'd hoped. Derek forwarded me a screenshot from their family group chat not long after. Dad insisting a lawyer said they needed proof he's unstable, Kyle floating the idea of getting a key made, Mom admitting she didn't have one, Kyle asking if they could just go in while I wasn't home. They'd planned it in writing, in a group chat, like people who'd never once considered they might get caught. I forwarded it to the police, added it to my growing evidence folder, and installed cameras inside the house too. They'd crossed a line, and I was done playing defense. The hearing itself took less than half an hour. The judge worked through the folder methodically. Video stills, texts, incident reports, and finally the group chat conversation where my own brother discussed breaking in like it was a logistics problem. She asked my mother directly whether she'd told Kyle he could move in without my consent. Mom admitted it, quietly, staring at her hands. She asked my father why his car had been clocked driving past my house 4 separate times the same night. The power went out. I was just driving by, he said, and even his own lawyer looked unconvinced. I'm granting the permanent restraining order, she said. 500 feet, no contact, no third-party contact, no social media posts referencing the petitioner. Violation results in arrest and contempt charges. Family doesn't exempt you from the law. My mother cried in the hallway afterward and asked, if I was happy, I wasn't happy, I wasn't angry either. I was something quieter than both, just, finally, at peace. 3 months later, a letter arrived from my sister, Amanda, with a Thanksgiving photo tucked inside. Her family, smiling, nobody missing. On the back, she'd written, "You were right. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're necessary. Love you." I pinned it to the fridge next to Mrs. Chen's dumpling recipe, a postcard from Derek's vacation in Mexico, and a photo from a company barbecue with coworkers who'd never once treated my life like something they were entitled to. My fridge isn't empty anymore. It just has different people on it now. Better ones. I still keep the cameras running, the alarm armed, the new locks in place, even though I don't think I need them anymore. Not really. I keep them because I've learned something that took me 30 years and one very long weekend to understand. A boundary isn't really about keeping people out. It's about knowing for certain that you can.